So I think it goes without saying that Wizards of the Coast has been a mixed bag recently. They've given us a 30-year anniversary celebration product that nobody can afford, and then given it to a whole bunch of multimillionaires who can afford it, and then made a $700 ticket for their 30th anniversary thing in Las Vegas. And of course, it comes with the anniversary packs and all that other fun stuff. It's been fun. But I want to go ahead and maybe go on a bit of a rant as to what's become of the game of Magic the Gathering versus when I was a kid, when I was playing it. And I know this isn't really going to mean a whole lot to most people outside of me, myself, and I, but I still want to go ahead and get my opinions out there. So, when I was a kid, when I started playing Magic, it was in Mirrodin block. That was, 2003. I started playing Elves. I learned very quickly that cards like Heedless One could close out games in an obnoxiously quick fashion. And I started learning how to play the game, not only with Elves, but with Affinity. I learned with very fast, very obnoxious mechanics that were overpowered for their time, as evidenced by the fact that they are still used today in the modern format. I then went into the Kamigawa and Ravnica blocks, having quit the game for a bit in Kamigawa, but, quit as long as a kid normally would quit. Played in Ravnica for a while, and that's when I actually fell in love with the game and its lore and everything, as opposed to just playing it every now and again when I had friends around me who played. And then I stopped playing again for a while, and started picking things back up around the time Ikoria was in Standard. Now, this may not mean a whole lot to players who are new to the game or who have been established and never stopped playing, and so they got to experience all of these things over the course of a long period of time as opposed to a sudden transition. But let me kind of juxtapose what the game was versus what the game is now to maybe give an idea of how much things have really changed and why I don't necessarily think it's for the better. So, back when I was playing as a kid, not saying that things were, better back when I was playing as a kid, but when I was playing back then, Standard was the format to play. If you played Magic the Gathering, you played what was called Type 2, and the Type 2 format is the equivalent to our current Standard format. It had our rotation. It is the thing that Wizards seem to put all their design know-how into, and for better or worse, it was Magic the Gathering. It's what you played. It's what you enjoyed. However, there were always side formats to play. If you wanted to play with your legacy cards, you played Type 1 format. That was your unlimited format, and most people tended to stay away from it because it was considered to be the more overpowered format. Anything goes, so anything that Wizards had rotated out of the game naturally was out and gone, and you were not having to deal with things like, losing your turn to your opponent from cards that were stuck in Mirrodin block. Now, this had ups and downs. The other games that I played around the time were things like Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Yu Yu Hakusho card game, Duel Masters, games that didn't really have the same kind of rotation that I was used to here, at least not in any of the areas that I played. As a result, Magic was the game that had the stable competitive environment where power creep didn't affect things anywhere near as much, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the game that I was always going to have to keep up with, and lo and behold, I ended up playing more Yu-Gi-Oh! Growing up, but that's really not the case anymore, because I think that game's hit a point of critical mass. What I'm trying to say is, rotation kept Magic at a nice, even pace. Power creep happened, yeah, but it didn't happen to anywhere near the degree that I had experienced in other card games. And then there was EDH. It was not a recognized format at the time, but whenever I would finish a tournament with my friends, we would all go out to Denny's and sit at a table till about 3 in the morning, playing Commander. Again, this is before Wizards of the Coast officially recognized Commander as a format. This is before things like even the Wizards Tower had been conceptualized back during the early days of Fat Packs. This is back when you could get the Magic the Gathering novels when you bought fat packs. Half the reason you bought a fat pack, a bundle, was because you got the novel. Collectors would hold on to them, but a lot of us would actually, read those things and enjoy things like the story of Ravnica as told from the perspective of Ardent Coast. Going forward, though, when I started playing Magic again, it was incredibly difficult for me because things like Arena had convinced me that the game I loved still existed. I still could get in a game of Magic the Gathering with standard rotated cards and walk into a tournament with those and have a good time. That really isn't the case anymore. Back when I was a kid, things like Commander were the side things you played after tournaments to cool down. Now, Commander is the main event. Things like Standard were considered to be the healthy format that everybody gravitated to, and now it's considered to be something that's slapdash and not really cared for anywhere near as much as it used to be. And we get things like Bone Crusher Giant and Oko and Alrund's Epiphany, and they recently had to get rid of Meathook Massacre because, lo and behold, printing Liliana of the Veil and Sheoldred in the exact same set has somehow meant that mono black decks are infinitely more powerful in Standard. Who would have thought? And I'm not saying that Standard was perfect back when I was playing. I grew up in the heyday of the original Jund decks, dropping Broodmate Dragons on people for ludicrous amounts of value. I'm not saying the game was in a super healthy state back then, but I am saying that we've had cards banned far more often nowadays with the current way that Wizards designs cards. And again, I think a lot of this comes down to a higher focus on the Commander format. As a result, I've found myself not caring for Standard because the people around me don't care for Standard. I found myself gravitating towards Modern because that's really the only competitive format that I was able to play for the longest time until Pioneer was pushed more by Wizards. And even then, that's only being focused on because Wizards has pushed the format. And it's not like Pioneer is going to be absolved of any of the problems that Standard created. In fact, Standard legal cards are the things that make it into Pioneer. What's different about Modern? Because it used to be that the Type 1 format was where you played all your old busted cards. Well, now it's not where you play your old busted cards. It's where you play the new busted cards. Cards that are considered far too powerful for the Standard format get printed in Modern Horizon sets now. And it's not that I don't enjoy those sets. I started playing Modern in Modern Horizons 2, so the only Modern format I've played is the format that exists with Ragavan and Darcy and Murktide Regent. That's the only Modern I've ever played. And it's astounding to me that version of Modern, despite my love for decks like Affinity and Hardened Scales, which work perfectly fine in that format, that the format's such a mess. We had 4-color Omnath dominating for a long-ass time, and before then, we had 2-mana decks that were being dominated completely by things like Luris of the Dream Den, and these took forever for Wizards to remove from the game. Now, they still exist in other formats, yeah, obviously, but this brings us back to the Standard format. Modern Horizons may have brought us our Murktide Regents, our Ragavans, and our Darcys, but the cards that have enabled the format to become such a problem are not just in Modern Horizons. This all loops back onto that Standard product. Standard is supposed to be the set that is lower power by comparison to some of the things that have existed in the past, at the very least by volume. But that's not really what has happened. Things like the companion mechanic, which really doesn't belong in Magic the Gathering at all, by my estimation, maintain a foothold in several formats. Commander I'm less concerned about, because while I have my issues with how the Rules Committee handles bans in Commander, things like saying that Gaia's Cradle won't be banned in Commander because it's budget restrictive, And then Wizards prints proxies, and now there's not a budget restriction to things like Gaia's Cradle, because why not just proxy a Gaia's Cradle? Well, the rules committee said that it would be banned if there wasn't a budget restriction. Well, if you're playing with proxies, there is no budget restriction, so should you play with Gaia's Cradle? Ignoring that whole circular argument, I'm not too concerned about the Commander format for this. My concerns are with the health of the game. It feels to me that Wizards of the Coast, when I was younger, cared more about creating a game that encapsulated chess. Chess as expressed through a collectible card game. You could get two well-built decks, sit across the table from each other, and perform decently well. Now it seems like either by a combination of things like MTG Goldfish homogenizing several strategies, or the fact that Wizards is printing so many more powerful cards these days, it seems like it's harder and harder to build your own decks. It seems like it's more and more difficult to come up with any strategy that will function in a tournament setting that is not just the tried and true ones. And I know people like Spike have gone on to Twitch and have shown that there are other strategies that can work. Professional players can still brew in this format, but I don't think that actually matters. My reason being is 90% of Magic players are not professional players. 90% of Magic players are some form of casual, even if they have a powerful modern or standard deck that they go into competitive tournaments with. They are still not professional players by the strictest sense. They are still people who are playing the game for fun with their friends and at tournaments. I'm not saying that net decking is bad. Net decking is a thing that exists in any and all formats of any and all card games. It's almost a necessary evil when only a handful of cards are printed with the absurd power levels required to function within any given format. Net decking becomes a necessity to keep up. Not everybody can spend the time it takes learning how to brew a proper deck and then playing that proper deck to begin with. What I'm saying is, Magic the Gathering, the game I grew up with, the game that was a brewer's paradise, the game that had a competitive standard rotating circuit that people paid attention to and people enjoyed, that game is kind of dead. And I'm not saying that it's better or worse now. The brewer's paradise components I enjoyed from Magic in the past are now basically in the Commander format. So I still have my way of playing the game I love. And the competitive aspects of Magic that I cared about before are now mostly relegated to the Pioneer and the Modern formats. And I don't hate Modern. I enjoy what it is as it stands. I guess I'm more lamenting the fact that we've come to this stage in the first place. A game that shouldn't have experienced power creep the way that it has because of rotation, that should have made power creep less relevant because it has the ability to take overpowered cards and move them out of its format, is experiencing power creep still. And Wizards of the Coast is incentivized to continue that power creep because it's not like standard cards become less relevant when they rotate. When I was younger, standard cards lost their value as soon as they rotated. Now, they maintain their value due to the proximity of the Commander's Modern and Pioneer formats. Because cards do not lose their value anymore, players are still incentivized to seek out those cards. Wizards is still incentivized to print those cards at higher and higher power, as opposed to just building cards for lower power levels, knowing that they are going to rotate out anyway, and letting mistakes of the past exist in the past. I'm of the firm opinion that you can have exciting and fun cards printed into this format without having another Luris of the Dream Den or another Oko. I'm a firm believer that you can have strong cards printed in a format that people will gravitate to and enjoy without relying on things like Me Took Massacre, which in a bubble isn't really the worst thing in the world, and in fact is a wonderful piece for aristocrat decks in Commander, but gets out of hand when you think of the amount of value engines a mono black deck can push out in Standard right now. The game I love is, well, kinda dead. And I don't know if the game that exists right now is better or worse. I'm still going to keep playing it, and I do enjoy it, and I'm even starting a channel to talk about it because this is a game that means a lot to me. It hasn't meant as much to me in the past, but it does now, because Magic is how I get out of the house. It's how I socialize. It's how I experience having time with friends. It's become a lot more important to me in recent years, so I'm going to be dedicating my time to it. But I'm also not going to sugarcoat my opinions about what the company that created a game that I grew up with and a game that I love. I'm not going to sugarcoat my opinions on that company, and I'm not going to sugarcoat my opinions on the product they make. That said, I guess this is a long-ass preamble into saying I am starting a Magic the Gathering channel, and this is the first video going up on that channel. If you want to subscribe to it, I would absolutely love having you on here. I normally do political content on my main channel, but for those who don't want to deal with that, I have 2 other channels where you can still watch me and the stuff that I do. I'm splitting the Neko Suris channel that I normally do all of my dump content on into a card game channel and a video game channel respectively. If you're watching this video, you have found yourself on the card game side of my channel. That said, I do want to thank you for watching this video. I know it's a lot more somber than I want to be, and I plan on making more uplifting and fun content in the future. But for now, thank you for hearing at least one random-ass VTuber's opinion on this game on the internet. I really do appreciate it. And if you are watching still, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know how this game has changed for you, and if there was any culture shock for you. And as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.